Well, hey there, my hard-working patriots, porch-sitting philosophers, and folks who've ever pushed something heavy just because you already started pushing it. Welcome back to the One-Eye Podcast, the only show hosted by a man with one good eye, two sore shoulders, and a garage full of tools that swear they ain't ever seen each other before. I'm your host, Pappy Lozano, handyman, husband, and living proof that stubbornness can be a renewable energy source. Now, today's episode is called The Wheelbarrow, the Garden Cart, and Why It's Okay to Start Over. And if you ever been halfway through a job, sweating like a sinner in church, and thought, there's got to be a better way, then you're already speaking my language. Today, we're going to talk about hard work, stubborn habits, and that moment you realize you've been pushing life the hard way when there might have been an easier path sitting right beside you all along. It's a story about pride, about humility, and about understanding that starting over ain't quitting. Sometimes it's wisdom. So grab your coffee, your sweet tea, or whatever keeps your back from locking up, and let's get into it. Now, I've owned my wheelbarrow for a long time. I'm pretty sure it came over on the Ark with Noah. One crooked tire, handles worn smooth, tray bent just enough to always dump dirt exactly where you don't want it. But I love that wheelbarrow because wheelbarrows ain't fancy. They're honest. A wheelbarrow don't beep at you. It don't need batteries, and it don't connect to Wi-Fi. It sure don't have modes. It's just got one mode, work. Now, where I'm from, a wheelbarrow is like a rite of passage. A man gets a wheelbarrow, a good shovel, and a socket set, and suddenly he thinks he's ready to conquer life. I've always believed, deep in my American soul, if it's heavy, you push harder. That's how I was raised. You don't complain, you don't whine, and you don't look for shortcuts. You put your head down and you grind, which sounds real good until you're 64 years old, pushing 300 pounds of mulch uphill, and your back starts speaking in tongues. So here's how this story began. My wife, bless her patient heart, comes out one morning and says, "Babe, could you freshen up the flower bed?" Now, freshen up sounds cute, but in husband language, freshen up means go move half the earth until the yard looks like Pinterest. So I go down to the local Ace Hardware store, buy bags of mulch, and let me tell you, mulch bags have gained weight since I was young. I swear, a bag used to be 20 pounds. Now it's like picking up a fully grown deer. So I load up the truck, haul it home, and I start the job. I pull out my wheelbarrow, and I do what I always do. Load it up like I'm training for the strongman competition. Because I don't load a wheelbarrow based on reason. I load it based on confidence. Wheelbarrow confidence is dangerous. It'll whisper in your ear, you can take it all in one trip. Next thing you know, you're pushing so much weight, the tire looks like it's praying for mercy. So I'm pushing this shovel toward the backyard. One wheel, one eye, one man. And I'm feeling good until that wheel catches a little dip. And friends and patriots, the wheelbarrow wobble. Now there's a special kind of panic when a wheelbarrow starts to wobble because you ain't holding a tool. You're holding a decision. And that decision is, am I going to save this or am I going to wear this? That wheelbarrow leaned left, I leaned right, and the whole thing dumped like a drunk uncle falling out of a lawn chair. Mulch everywhere, all over my boots, all over the driveway, all over my pride. I stand there for a second, staring at that mess, and I hear my wife from the porch. Everything okay? And I said, yep, because as husbands, we have a sacred rule. Never admit defeat while you're still outside. So I scoop it back up, load it again, push it again, and dump it again, unintentionally. By the third spill, I'm out there looking like I got attacked by a compost monster. And I started realizing this ain't hard work anymore. This is stubbornness with a shovel. Now here's the part that'll humble a man, because sitting right there by the garage was the garden cart. 4-wheel, stable, smooth rolling, handle that pulls easy. And it's just sitting there like, you sure you want to do it the hard way again, hero? Well, just about then my wife walks out, looks at me covered in mulch, and she says real calm, why don't you use the cart? And I said the dumbest thing a man can say. That's for light stuff. She goes, babe, you're hauling 300 pounds. I said, yeah, but the wheelbarrow builds character. And she says, so does ibuprofen. Now, my wife don't argue much. She just hits you with truth and walks away. And right then, I felt it. That little pinch of pride, because the cart was easier. And easier felt like cheap. And so, as any stubborn patriotic husband would do, I kept pushing that wheelbarrow. Not because it was best, but because I'm the kind of man that feels he's simply dripping with pride. And because I already committed to it. And as I felt that wheelbarrow shifting again, that spill in my back ceased to acknowledge my existence and sought my common sense to intervene. And that's when life taught me something. A wheelbarrow is kind of like a lot of things we do in life. Old habits, old routines, old ways of thinking, old arguments, and telling ourselves, this is how I've always done it. Sometimes we keep pushing the hard way, not because it's right, but because it's familiar. And that familiar feeling is often falsely masked as being safe, even when it's making you miserable. Thought about all the times I did that. Times I refused help. Times I insisted on doing things my way. Things and times I stayed stuck because I didn't want to start over. And that's when I heard my pappy's voice in my head. My pappy used to say, son, hard work is honorable, but dumb hard work is just practice for back pain. And I realized I wasn't being tough, I was being stubborn, and there is a difference. So I did it. I dumped the wheelbarrow, walked over to that garden cart like it was an apology, and I shoveled up all that mulch and loaded the mulch into the garden cart. And with aches and pains and covered head to toe in mulch, I turned and whispered an apology to my old rusty wheelbarrow. And that garden cart rode so smooth, I swear I heard angels singing. No wobble, no spill, no fight. I finished the whole job quicker, and I wasn't mad. That alone was a miracle. And right there, pulling that cart, I learned the lesson. Starting over ain't quitting. It's the just. It's saying maybe there's a smarter way. It's wisdom. And I could hear my dear old Pappy saying, each day you're learning that life is better when you get your work done so you can sit and enjoy a cool glass of tea. And I believe Out of the corner of my eye, I saw my wife a smiling with pride in our kitchen window. Now I'm going to say something simple about marriage. It ain't preachy, just true. Sometimes your wife is the garden cart. She ain't trying to control you. She's trying to keep you from suffering unnecessarily. When she says, "Why don't you do it this way?" she's not saying you're dumb. She's saying, "I love you, and I'd like you to have a spine when you're 70. And when I finally used that cart, my wife just smiled. That smile said, "Look at you, learning." And in marriage, that's a win. Same with family. Same with life. Sometimes your kid, your buddy, your neighbor, or your spouse will show you a better way. And it takes humility to accept it. But humility ain't weakness. It's strength with manners. Here's my porch wisdom for today. Hard work is good, but hard work don't mean being hard-headed. There's a difference between grit and grinding yourself down for no reason. If you've been pushing something heavy in your life and you're tired, maybe it ain't because you're weak. Maybe it's because you're using the wrong tool. And if you need to dump the load, step back and take a long look at that spilled load you've been carrying. Maybe it's time to take a deep breath and start over. That ain't failure. That's wisdom. That's you learning. That's you adjusting like a grown man and letting wisdom crawl into your well-being. And let me tell you, a man who can admit he needs a better way, that's a man who's gonna go far, even if he's only got one good eye. Well, folks, that wraps up today's episode of the One-Eyed Podcast, the wheelbarrow, the garden cart, and why it's okay to start over. Today we learned, number one, just because you can push it, don't mean you should. Number two, pride will spill more mulch than gravity ever could. Number three, starting over ain't quit. Sometimes it's wisdom. And number four, if your wife suggests an easier way, well, she might be right. Just don't tell her I said that. Now, if this episode made you laugh or nod your head, share it with someone who's been pushing life the hard way. As always, remember to be kind to one another, if only because you can be, and we all can be always. Stay humble, stay grateful, and don't be afraid to set that wheelbarrow down and try a different cart. God bless you, God bless your home, and God bless the United States of America. Pappy out.